Good evening and welcome to the historic Hawaii Theater. I'm Dave Moss, the Executive Director of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. It's Tuesday, it's 7:30 p.m., so you're tuning in live for Tuning Up with...
Hello, I'm Iggy.
And Dave. Tuning Up with Iggy and Dave. It's so great to have you all with us here on Tuesday, the second episode in season 2.
Spring semester.
Spring semester, yes. Iggy, we have a very special guest this evening.
Yes, let's get right to it.
Right to it.
I actually don't talk to you that much because you're sitting across the aisle in the orchestra. And so tonight, just like all of you here, will be the opportunity to get to know you better. We are very, very happy to welcome Josh Nakazawa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic cellist.
Honored to be here and talk story with you guys.
That's right.
Thanks.
So you have a wealth of things to tell us. You are very well-rounded. I remember one time we were just talking and you started to talk about mid-modern century furniture or something. We'll get to it at some point. You had some advice for myself as I was going shopping at a furniture store. But anyway, I feel like I'm the oldest person on stage, and every time because Dave is so young, you're so young. I feel like I can be the father of them all. Josh, before.
You look
Hawaii.
so young. You look like you're my brother. I know what you're talking about.
Before Hawaii.
He looks younger every week. I look older every week. There's the...
Because one of us between Dave
You got a
and
very
I,
hard job, though, so it's probably,
That's right.
it's probably
one of them, one of us works a lot more than the other. You actually look like you could be from here, from Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Hapa, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah.
And we had a guest a few weeks ago, I think, Elena. Before you get to your story, just curious. My sister-in-law lives in Boston, which is, I guess, where you grew up. When you grew up as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Boston. I grew up in Cambridge, actually. My father was going to school there. And
he was a student.
He was a student. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in, student housing in Cambridge. And I was originally born in New York and then moved when I was very young to Cambridge. And I loved growing up there. And I was influenced by music a lot. My mother was a flute teacher, or is a flute teacher. She's been a flute teacher for as long as I can remember. And, she would take me a lot to her. She played in some regional orchestras, and she would take me around there while my father was in school.
So I'm sorry, when did you move to Boston from New York?
Oh, I must have been like 2 and a half, super young. Yeah.
And your dad was majoring in what field?
Architecture.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And so, having a mother who's a flute teacher, how do you end up with the cello?
Oh, well, I guess there are a lot of influences, but she would take me to her evening rehearsals, and I would, I guess, sit near the cello section during that time, and I think they were all very nice to me. I mean, I was so young, the memories are very vague, because I started when I was like 4 years old, right? So
By choice?
So I've been told.
Oh.
That I started by choice, but I have a vague memory of like the cello section and just like having a good time with them there, and then like them saying like, you don't want to play the cello, and then that made me really want to play the cello even more.
Do you have any siblings?
I don't. I'm an only child.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you started at 4.
Yeah.
What is it, of course I would say that as a violinist, what is it that you find in the cello that you can't find in the violin?
Or the viola?
Is this a riddle?
It's an open-ended question. There's no riddle to it.
Oh, okay. What can I find like literally inside of the cello? Or
More air?
more air. There you go. There's the answer. Yeah.
No, I guess I'm saying it's something about the voice, the quality of the voice that maybe is more palatable to you than a violin?
I think I maybe if I sat by the violin section, maybe I'd be playing violin. I just was sitting over there. I guess I was really just heavily influenced by the people that were around me. But I love the violin. I love the repertoire for the violin, and but I also love the cello. The range of it. It's like a human voice, ranging from very deep to very high. And over the years, after practicing it and sticking with it for so long, it just became my voice. So,
of course,
yeah.
That's great. So you settled in Boston, but you went to quite a few schools around the country?
I did. In Boston, I did a lot of the outside programs that helped with pre-college. So there was New England Conservatory, and there was also the Greater Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, and I did stuff with them, involved myself in like chamber music and orchestra at the time. And after that, when I became more serious about it, I auditioned for a lot of different conservatories. I ended up getting into a few, and then ended up going to Manhattan School of Music, who I think your last guest was also went there, no? Or I'm not sure. Perhaps not.
We had a guest, but I don't believe the last one, but I think some guests.
Yeah, so I went to Manhattan School of Music, and then after that, I went to Southern Methodist University, SMU.
In Texas.
In Texas. And then after that, I went to Royal Conservatory in Canada, in Toronto.
So I was wondering, when you're a cellist, are there different schools of cello? Because I grew up in France, and there's quite a contention of French people who think the French school of cello is very, very good. Pierre Fournier, Tortelier, etc., etc. But you studied in the U.S., but also in Canada, and I guess it depends on the lineage from your teachers.
Well, I ended up studying with Americans that were in Canada. But aside from that, no, there are so many different pedagogies out there. And I think part of being a student is going out there and combining and learning from all the different pedagogies and kind of formulating what speaks to you, right? And becoming your own musician. And, there are different bow techniques that they've taken from Starker or Cole or Nightkrug, and you can decide what works for you and why. And there are so many different cellists that a lot of talk about, should the cello be really high up on your body and like hold it like way far back, like you're riding like a chopper motorcycle or something, right? Or should it be like some of the famous cellists hold it really down low and just play it like almost bent over? So there are those different schools, and you kind of have to decide for yourself at the end of the day what it is that works for you. So,
you seem, quite young, but I'm just curious, because you're very ebullient, always, cheerful personality. Were you always like that growing up, at home, at school, inside the home? Were you a well-behaved young boy, or did you get in trouble, or?
I guess we all have our ups and downs.
Tell us.
I had very supportive parents all the way through. And I don't know. I guess I kind of I felt like a double life or something. All my friends in high school weren't really. And I went to public school, and they didn't play any music, and they didn't. That was like a whole nother group. And then there were, when I would go and study music, that was a whole nother social dynamic, And so I definitely think that there were like two different parts of me growing up, and I also moved around a lot at that time. So I was constantly having to kind of like make new friends, and when I was younger.
But I feel like you were a fish in the water. You could navigate really freely and merge and get along with everyone.
I mean, it was a learning experience. I think that it didn't go so hot in the very beginning, but then as you do it more and more, just like anything else, like you're gonna get good at it eventually, one would hope, because to survive, So I think that, I don't know, maybe now I feel that's my comfort zone. I like trying new things, meeting new people, doing new projects and that kind of thing. But I don't know. Maybe it stemmed from doing just having to do it when I was younger, and now I enjoy it.
Very good. Dave, if people have questions.
Yes, well, first of all, people are already
Yes.
writing in.
Wow.
And a shout out from your former neighbors, Daryl and Paul, who are joining us this
Okay.
evening.
Hey, guys.
And if you would like to join us in conversation tonight, we encourage it and do enjoy hearing from you, especially our friends in D.C. Good to see you here again this evening. A busy week there for you tomorrow. So welcome again. If you'd like to talk with us, there is a phone number here at the bottom of your screen in which you can text, and we will get those messages, and happy to answer questions, and always good to hear from you.
Dave, I'm curious, what kind of young man or young boy were you when you were growing up?
So I'll tell you that every time we have a guest come on the show, we don't do a whole lot of preparation, but the one thing we do ask is there anything you don't want to talk about? Iggy and I have never had this conversation.
Obviously not.
No, I was a very well-balanced child.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah. All right.
Yes. I want to ask about Toronto.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite cities.
Me too.
Yeah. What was your favorite part about living there?
Ooh. I used to live in New York before that.
Yeah.
And New York, it's just so many people there. It's, they say that it's like a melting pot. But every culture is kind of living in their own little area within New York, whereas Toronto, it really is the melting pot. Everybody's living together, and everybody's getting along, and I just love that about Toronto, how everybody's really just completely living, just intermingling with each other. And I also love the fact how the city's laid out. It's bikeable. You can just bike from one side to the other side. You can also just go underground because most of the city is underground. So in the wintertime, you don't have to go. You can just use the tunnels, which are lined with stores and restaurants and whatnot. And the music professionals there are really fantastic. I love all the music professionals out there and how they really take an interest in cultivating their students in a way that's really productive, and they really take students under their wing and treat them almost as equals. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, in the culture there, it really encourages the student in a different way, which in some other experiences it's been like my way or the highway, like I'm like the greatest and you better bow down kind of like sentiment. But there, that respect is still there for the teacher because of how much they've accomplished, yet they take you in a way that you can experience, professional life so that you're really ready for it. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you've picked up on that. That's something also that I've noticed from the colleagues that I have in Toronto is that the next generation is so important, and it's almost this collaborative nature between the generations of performers there, and just also the diversity of types of music and types of ensembles. It's probably doesn't come as a surprise that Toffle music there in Toronto is just one of the fascinating ensembles that I had the chance to work with.
I kind of want to share this story because I think the reason why I play music came from experience I had in Canada. I was playing with the National Arts Centre Orchestra as their kind of like intern, I guess. And they have this series where they perform nationalistic music. And they have like a Canadian composer, contemporary composer, play something based on a specific theme, and the theme was women's suffrage in Canada. And we did this show, and it was about this girl named Amanda Todd, and she was the piece was written about her, And they had this like scrim come down, and they had like these dancers projected on the scrim, and then we were playing behind it so that we could kind of see the orchestra behind it. It was kind of like a mixture of the orchestra and the images. And the piece was written for her and about her, and her story was that she was like maybe like 13 years old or something like that, 14, and she the internet was like just born. It was like just kind of just a brand new thing. Nobody really knew the power of the internet, and I think that she had like put nude photos of herself on the internet, and she got a lot of flack and a lot of like internet bullying after that, and she ended up committing suicide because of it, because it was so intense. And that was one of the first instances that people really realized how powerful the internet was. And we played this concert, and at the end of the concert, Amanda's parents were sitting out in the audience. And they came up on stage, after we performed it, and there was not a dry eye in the entire hall. Like, you can feel the energy had changed. People were affected. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, this is what it's about. It's current events. It's music that's reaching all of these people about a topic that's so important, and it's using the medium of music to really make a change and to reach people's, emotional souls. And it just hit me then and there, and that experience playing with that orchestra and the production and the purpose. And so, but if it wasn't for that experience of being kind of in between this professional stage, being taken in to these professionals that have been going for so long, I don't think I would have ever been able to really have that recognition or that kind of like epiphany.
Yeah. Wow, how powerful.
Yeah.
And it's obviously led to a lot of interdisciplinary work that you have done throughout your career. It's not just about sitting down with an orchestra. It's teaching. You've pieced together so many interesting things here during your time with the orchestra. You're probably the first musician I actually saw here in Hawaii, and we were living in the same neighborhood at the time, and we were all on lockdown, and I came out in a daze, and Josh is calling my name across the street, and you were so warm and so welcoming at a time that was very difficult for us all, and that personality of yours comes across in your music and comes across in the ways that you connect with other artists, not only musical artists, but painters and dancers and the like. Is it just that experience that you just talked about that led to that? Were there other influences that led to kind of the cross arts collaborations that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the core of that moment. It all kind of goes back to there. But I listened to this podcast called Design Matters by Debbie Millman. Do you know it?
Yeah.
Okay, so like she has on her show just like all these new entrepreneurs, like really successful, and they all have kind of like a similar backstory. It's just like, I started doing things for my community, and then the more I did for my community, the more success I got, and then everything just kind of built on top of that and worked out for them. But they had this kind of happiness that wasn't just about monetary happiness and doing well financially. They had this kind of like did things for their community, proud of what they did kind of happiness that was like so much more appealing. I was like, that's what I want, But aside from that, I do think it's really great to connect with so many of the people that are in the community to do a variety of just different projects together.
So in fact, you were mentioning, we're skipping a little bit of time, but when you came here, you were very impressed by Jake Shimabukuro, and you were very impressed by the orchestra. And if we skip ahead to a couple years, then you end up working with Jake because you had so much admiration and you found so much affinity with him. Tell us
Yeah.
about how you were able to play with the symphony, but also, as Dave said, you have multi-interests. You're also able to work with people like Jake.
Yeah, so when I first took the audition here, I was subbing with the symphony, and so I was going to take the audition that week, and the symphony was so kind enough because I had subbed with them before, to hire me again for that week. And that week, Jake Shimabukuro was premiering his ukulele concerto with the symphony.
That Byron Yasui was composing.
That Byron Yasui composed, and I was blown away. It was the first time I had heard him play, and I fell in love. It was just incredible to me. And I was so moved, and that very next day, I won the job with the symphony. And I was like, yes, maybe I'll get to play with Jake one day. But it just so happened to worked out. He had arrangements for cello that he wanted to play. I was, I guess, the new young jealous guy here, and he had friends. We had mutual friends that went back to Boston, that we both knew that it worked out that way, and we got to play together. And he has been everything, a good friend, a mentor, a colleague. He's been everything. But in the mentorship, so much more so, because he really opened up my just classical acoustic instrument, live, not mic'd world to just a whole other side of music that I had never seen before, that I didn't even know was really possible. And the fact that he can cross genres so easily and play on both sides of the field was really appealing to me. And the way that he interacts with so many people, bringing people into the project that he does, was an inspiration for me. And also, the possibilities of how to now make your cello, all the different gear you can use for it to get it to sound the way you want it to sound, and to record the way you want to record, and the process behind that. And also just introductions to a lot of really great people in the community too, that have helped me carry me along the way and performing in different areas. So I think that he was really a monumental bridge into opening up to different people. The symphony just played with Ron Artis, and I remember I had met Ron Artis through Jake, through the very first concert we played together. He sang, and I heard his voice, and I was like,
we all were.
Yeah, just totally moved. And the musical community here, before him, I was kind of just doing a lot in the classical realm, and then meeting all of these other artists that were already in the community that have been doing things forever that were incredible. It was so exciting to kind of be able to work with them now.
And Dave, with Jake and Josh playing, that was one of your first opportunity to open your viola case and join the band.
It's the one
Tell us about
opportunity.
that.
It's the one opportunity that I've actually had to open, as you said, to open my viola case and play. And Josh and Jake invited me to sit on a show that you guys were doing at Blue Note. I want to say that was probably back in May, June.
Yeah, that was June.
It seems like a decade ago at this point. But yeah, it was really amazing to have that experience. With Jake, he is such a tremendous performer and such a kind person, and really interested, as you've said, in making these connections for the community and sustaining the arts here, both the past and the future. And he's someone who bridges both of those so well. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And Josh, there's actually a thread, because you shared the stage at that time with some musicians who stayed in Hawaii longer than expected, and some nice projects came out of it. Tell us, let's go back a little bit, maybe, I don't know, March of last year?
Yeah.
And so what happened? You had a concert, right?
Yeah, so there was a violinist here, Eric Silberger, and he kind of has his own festival here, Hawaii International Music Festival, which is fantastic. And he brought me on to do a concert of Piazzolla music with a bandoneon player, J.P. Joffrey, who is also fantastic. I think he was planning on doing recording with the London Phil, but then I don't know if that happened yet. We were playing tango music, and we were doing an island tour, and this was back in March. And we were just finishing the tour, and Eric was going to fly off to Korea or something to do a concert, and but COVID started to show, and we became unsure of the future. And I had one more gig left. It was on the USS Missouri, and it was scheduled for mid-March or something like that. And I was like, Eric, if you guys and Manuel, also the violinist, if you guys just want to stay at my place for another week and then do this gig.
It was back in March.
This is back in March. Like, you guys just want to stay. It's cool. Like, it's not safe to fly right now. Like, we don't know what's happening. Like, let's just play this gig, and then we can, figure it out. And so they were like, okay, that sounds good. Thanks. And they stayed, and we played that gig, and they stayed from March until July. Yeah. Yeah. And that was literally the last live performance I played for people to this day. And but at the time, Dwayne Padilla was also playing, and they didn't know each other. And I was like, Dwayne, come over to my house for a drink. Everybody should get to know each other. And we ended up reading some music together, and Dwayne had written this arrangement, Queen Lilia Kalani arrangement.
Of her music. And we played through it that night. For string quartet.
For string quartet, yeah. So he arranged it. They weren't originally composed for string quartet. It was just her, the last Queen of the Monarchies, compositions. And she and he had arranged it for string quartet. And we're like, this is cool. Let's play it. And we realized, the history. You're like, her palace is right over there. And then, it's like, she was imprisoned in her palace. And they're like, we kind of feel imprisoned right now, being here, stuck here. And then we were playing through it, kind of feeling these eerie parallels. And we were like, we should record this. And then we, at the time, because we were doing that tour, he had all this recording equipment. Dwayne, as you know, does a lot of recording on his own. We just had copious amounts of recording equipment on our hands, and we were just staring right at it. It's we have it right here. We should do it. And so one thing turned into the next, and Dwayne would compose an arrangement, 2 a week, something like that. And then we would sit down, and our process, we would open up the Queen's songbook, and we would read her poetry or lyrics out of it, and then we would read a little bit of the historical background, and then we would record it. And so that we would feel what it's supposed to be. It would be imbued with what she had written. And that was our little project. And it snowballed. It snowballed into other things. It was really great. Greg Dunn, who is, thank you for letting us use this hall. He bridged the connection for me to get connected with this wonderful artist, Solomon Enos, who is the artist, and he did the album artwork for it. He's a local artist and just really extremely talented. And he just drew up this really beautiful, I told him the story of what we were doing. And then, the depiction of the cover almost looks like the creation of life through Hawaii in the story, if you look from the bottom to the top. And it was just, we commissioned him to do the cover for that. And then after that, we were like, we should really get a knowledgeable historian to really write about the accounts, because it'd be really important for people to know, because this is the kind of, how we did the arrangements was very true to the way that she composed it. It's very just, it's trying not to embellish it too much, And we're like kind of like, there is I think the Hawaii Symphony members did make another recording with it, and it was really beautiful, but it also had like harp and some other elements in it. Were you on that recording?
I don't believe so, but you had another famous arranger, I think, Alexander Pena, who's done a lot of instrument, and the symphony has done a lot of his arrangements. But but those are that you did were from Dwayne, and he tried to be closer to
just
core.
Like the core, and so we ended up asking Aaron Mahi to write the forward for it, and he graciously did that. And all of a sudden now we had this this felt like full. It was like a full project. A full circle. It was like it felt complete. It was like we have the cover that's beautiful from a local artist. We have this local historian who's so renowned here to write the forward, and we have we made I think 15 tracks are on there.
So a very productive few months at home. And so you mentioned Greg Dunn of the Hawaii Theater. We came today, I came a little early, you were already here. You were doing some maybe recordings for other projects. Tell us about your...
Can I ask a question
yes, please,
first?
Sorry,
yeah,
Dave.
absolutely, because this is a good segue, and I want to make sure we're getting through many of these questions here. And people have been asking about the quiz question as well, because we are drinking a wonderful unnamed Syrah tonight that we would love to share with you, and we'd love to come up with a quiz question in the next 29 minutes. So we will be doing that shortly here. But first, a question from your barber, Jordan.
Okay.
I guess that's like the barber of Seville. Will you be teaching cello to the next generation of musicians? And if yes, how can we sign up?
Very great question. This actually segues into what Iggy was talking about.
Well, yeah, we planned this.
Oh, okay. So my latest project is that the past 9 months I developed a teaching program, and I had seen a lot of really great content online about cello, learning the cello online, and there's always some tidbits about, what do you do with the bow or vibrato? But the program that I'm coming up with that will be released at the end of February is a full-fledged program that starts from you don't have to know anything about the cello, and then in 4 months you can play the Bach cello suite of the prelude of the very first suite. And
what key is that?
G major.
Do, da, 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 da.
Yes.
Very good.
And so I've been filming it, and every single you're going to get daily lessons, and so each daily lesson is streamlined down to like one core topic for you to focus on, and each topic slowly and gradually increases you to the point where you can then play it, the Baron Reiter edition, with all of the proper bowings and all of the fingerings, with the shifting and everything.
So what is the very first lesson topic?
The very first topic is how to tune your cello. Or where to get one, actually. It starts from literally nothing and builds your way up slowly. So gradually.
What's unique about the bowings in the Baron Reiter edition?
Well, it's the original bowings of Bach, and also it is edited so that there could be some variation to the editor, but it's the original. It's closest to the original Bach's bowings.
So, sorry, Iggy, we're going to have an early music moment here. So, Bach wrote 6 suites for cello.
He did.
And did he have neat handwriting?
He did not have neat handwriting at all.
So we have these manuscripts,
Yeah.
and this is the same with the violin sonatas and partitas as well.
Yes, I would disagree though. Whoever wrote those manuscripts, I don't know if it's Bach or not.
Right.
It's very neat. It's just hard to read.
It is, yeah, to
Right.
interpret. So
Interpret it.
in we'll take it down to the very basic level. So in musical notation, you have the notes on the staff lines. And then for string instruments, you have bowings, which are either a down bow or an up bow, which is notated one way or another. And then you have slurs, so little, long lines over groups of notes indicating that you do them under one bow. Now, it might seem like this doesn't matter.
I explained this in the lessons, by the way.
Oh, okay. How'd I do?
No, keep going.
So, string players, especially when it comes to Bach, I feel like this is where we really spend a lot of our time, because bowings can shape music depending on how you do things. And you can play things two different ways by bowing it two different ways. And so with Bach's cello suites, which the violists play as well, confusing it one more level. There's 5 or 6 different manuscripts that we have from different sources, that because they couldn't just throw it on the copy machine. So we have all of these different editions going back to Bach's time and shortly after there, that cellists and violists and violinists painstakingly go over to try to replicate either what Bach wanted or throwing caution to the wind and coming up with their own interpretation of what the bowings could be.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question? Excuse me. Was that a question? I don't.
No question.
Yeah, no. So that's true. And, based on where you put the bowings, like what groupings you play the notes, certain ones are brought out. And so that will change the phrase completely, and it will change essentially the entire meaning emotionally of the piece. And so it's really important to choose your bowings wisely according to, I guess, what you believe as being the message behind the piece.
And also the bows during Bach's time were different than today's time. So today's bows are made so that you can sustain, and the down bow or the up bow will sound equally strong. Whereas in Bach's time, the down bow was much stronger, and so very often in Bach's music it's more da bum ba bum bum do bum. So, there are different interpretations. Maybe, Dave, my view is I looked at how people who do period performance do it. I could never do something like that myself, because my eyes are through the lenses of the modern centuries, and it's impossible to reject or deny my own heritage and my own history of what I've seen. Also the other point that I wanted to make is that if you talk to a number of experts of those times, the period instrument experts, they don't always come to an agreement. Dave, would you care to expand on that, please?
I completely agree. We have a number of treatises that people have written about how to play early music. Leopold Mozart is one of the most famous ones for violin, and there's the Quantz, which was actually a book on flute playing that a lot of string players use to talk about articulation and interpretation of early music. But that we can't go back and ask Bach how to play something, which is, I think, very neat when we have composers on our show and we can have them at our performances and talk with them about how the music. We can ask Michael Thomas Fumai how to play something, and he can tell us what his interpretation was. And so it just puts things in a very interesting context for us to keep music alive, by keep having these conversations and to see how it changes. And, again, we live in an era where we own incredible recording equipment, and we can, from our homes, record these things for posterity and for archival purposes and to learn from in the future. So I think that we opened up. I'm sorry, Iggy.
No, it's okay. One last point, though, because we're getting very technical. But
yes.
We're chasing butterflies.
Josh, like for violin, for instance, you have the original manuscript, and then you have some amazing godlike figures, like Henrik Schering or Heifetz, and they play Bach a certain way, and so they almost establish a norm because you hear, Schering play, you hear Grumiaux play Bach, and then everyone plays in that similar style. So much so that if someone else says, no, I'm going to play my own way, then it's not as much accepted. I think it's only within the last 10, 15 years that they kind of purify this sort of a romanticized way of playing Baroque music. I don't know who does the editing in Bach. Was Leonard Rose involved in the Bach? And so maybe in the older editions in the 50s, 60s, maybe it was very romanticized is that
well, yeah, you're given choices on how to play it, and it's just because the Baron-Reiter is like a golden standard for culturally how our schooling was brought up in playing, and what's just currently accepted globally. That we use this edition, but I urge people to do the research and to look at their own interpretations. I think it's really important to have a lot of different interpretations. At the end of the day,
Josh, at the end of the day, please tell us.
At the end of the day, I think that if you put a lot of thought into why you're performing something, and it's a really well-educated, well-rounded, thought-out process, that it will be imbued with that process, and you will be delivering your message. And whether it's accepted or not, that's not what being a musician and playing music is about. It's not falling into the norms and just doing it like everybody else. It's doing what your own creation, and that's what I think other people will appreciate in seeing. They already had that guy play it. He played it that way. Now let's hear
they want Josh.
Now let's hear Iggy play it the way Iggy likes to play it.
Have you had any test students in the program yet?
Yes. And it's been going. It's been great.
Can we ask you who that test focus group student is?
The focus group. You'll see the focus group when it comes out. Yeah, the focus group. No, I've been teaching Bach for this. So the reason why I came up with this program is because I've kind of been doing it already for years, for the past 15 years, teaching in this style where I'll almost do this combination between, in the beginning, Suzuki and Essential Elements and some of the old Piatigorsky and, all of the old school books. And then you work everything all together in what you believe is to be the most efficient way. And many of my students have been able to learn Bach on weekly lessons in 6 months.
Wow. Amazing. You mentioned Piatigorsky, who's an amazing cellist, played with Heifetz, but apparently I think the story I heard is that Piatigorsky also read quartet in LA with Albert Einstein for fun. And I think they asked him, how is Albert Einstein as a violin player? Because, Einstein played the violin this way, not that way. And Piatigorsky said, he's okay violinist, but he can't count. He doesn't know how to count.
Oh. Well, you learn how to count with my program. Very well.
All right, Dave, please bail us out.
Well, you have a quiz question for us this evening, Iggy.
I do, because as you remember, last week, Dave introduced this new segment called Off the Beaten Path, where we all each introduce a piece of music that you may not have heard of, but we think deserves more attention. So I have a piece in mind, but my quiz question has to do more. You know what? I'm going to change my piece today so we can do this quiz. So my piece for today, it's, of course, related to the inauguration day. It's called The Lincoln Portrait by Aaron Copland. Is a piece that Copland was commissioned by Kusevitsky from Boston, of course, to write in the early years of the war, and it's for orchestra and narration. The Eleanor Roosevelt was one who narrated, not the premiere, but she did it at some point. So the narration uses word from Lincoln. And so my quiz question is that we actually did this piece a number of years ago. And I would like to ask you, who was the guest narrator that performed Lincoln Portrait with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra? I can't remember exactly when that year was, but it was within the last 5-10 years.
And how did they answer this evening?
You can answer by texting this number. I'm like the weather guy. How was the weather by yesterday in your
Bad.
neck of the woods?
Really bad, raining all
Okay,
over
so
the island.
who was the narrator of the Lincoln Portrait? Dave, what piece did you select for us?
So I was not able to narrow it down to one piece. And this goes back, I think I shared last week, I'm reading this wonderful book by Amanda Beers on the forgotten women of classical music. And it starts way back at the beginning. And this past week, I dove into a composer that I knew very little about her history, but I had heard a lot of her music, and it was really fascinating to learn about this composer. Her name is Barbara Strozzi, and she was born in 1619. She's a Venetian composer. Venetian history at that time is not too kind to women creatives. Creativity was often risque, I will call it, and part of culture in Venetian life. And when you look at her male contemporaries of that time, we have very few remaining works from them. They weren't very widely published, even though that was the hub of printing and technology at that time. She has 8 volumes of works that were published. I think about 4 or 5 of them actually are still in existence today. And I came across a number of really beautiful recordings. This is obviously pre-symphonic music. This is mostly vocal music. She was the first composer to publish a cantata. We think of Bach as being the kind of the origin of the cantatas, but Strozzi actually had written a cantata and published it long before Bach did. So,
did you say
1619?
1619.
Yeah, born in Venice. Yeah. So one thing that we did last week is we were putting up some of these recordings on our website, and we've actually had a couple of requests here this evening to put up some of the things we've been talking about already, the programs with Josh and the programs with all of the other ones we've talked about here this evening. So we'll add some of my favorites on there and then add what are your choices for this evening.
That's great. And Josh, did you have a piece?
I'm going to have to go with the Ligeti Cello Sonata. And I performed that when I was in college. And I had a different cello at the time then. And the piece was written for a cellist that was from Budapest, going to the Budapest Conservatory at the time. And the current cello that I have now was from Pest, actually, before it became Budapest. But now that I have this cello that was written for a cellist from that region, I think it would be kind of fun to play the composition again
Absolutely.
with this instrument.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just a silly question. Violins are sold for, I don't know, X amount of dollars. Is a cello more expensive because it's bigger?
I don't think so. I think that
I do.
Are they?
I think it is. There are,
Really?
violin, cello, small price, big price. Is what I heard.
Really, I didn't.
Well, maybe not.
But basses, because basses aren't in that field, I think, or are they?
No. We're not.
I think the
talking
most
basses.
expensive instrument is a viola, actually.
Okay, so we're talking violin, Stradivarius, Cornell. Okay, this is off.
Okay.
That doesn't belong there. But I think in general,
Okay.
cello can be very expensive.
The older you go, the more rare it is, I guess. it just becomes a rarity, right?
Dave, you've actually been very lucky to have had some very nice violas.
I have. I've had the opportunity to play on a number of very nice instruments. I played on a Grancino for a while, and was very fortunate to have that experience and learned a lot playing that instrument, and took that to, the other instruments that I played on as well.
Well, sorry. John. It's kind of a silly question again, but what makes a great viola a great viola? I mean, is it the volume, the silkiness, the timbre? The player.
Yeah, I was like, is this a joke? No, I think what makes so the viola is the wrong size. So in order for a viola to be acoustically correct, it would have to be it's unplayable on the shoulder. You'd have to play it like a cello, and so you always make accommodations when you're making an instrument that can play as a viola. So it really comes down to balance. An instrument that has the size to resonate a good C string, but then also has a string length that doesn't kill your left hand.
So I played on the viola once, but it's like they go from 15-inch about to 17?
14 and a half to 17 and a quarter, I'd say.
Is there an acoustical difference?
There can be, not necessarily. It depends on the maker and how thin the wood is, and how the bass bar is in there, and all those sorts of things. So.
And actually, I played on a violin that was actually bigger than the norm.
Yeah.
I don't play on it very much. I mean, I don't have it anymore. I sold it, but it was a very unique experience. I'm sorry, Josh, I interrupted you. Were you going to say something?
No, I just I think we were on the topic of older instruments, and I just wanted to say, just so people out there know, that there is a huge difference between the way older instruments sound in comparison to newer instruments.
Sure.
And the older instruments have usually a much wider vocabulary of nuances in them that you're able to produce, but they're not easy to get them out. You kind of have to know how to draw out those specific, because you were saying you learned a lot. I'm playing. Yeah. It's like, what do you mean? Like, we can't learn on a new instrument too? But
you have to learn to work the instrument in a certain way, especially with the viola, because of all the size issues and.
So your cello from Budapest, is it old or new?
It's on the older side, yeah. It's in late 1800s.
So
or mid 1800s, sorry.
Here in Hawaii, I guess we're all wondering, because of the climate, is having an older instrument not a liability, but does it require more care because of the climate?
Well, it definitely sounds different. It sounds brighter and in colder climates, and it sounds a little bit darker in the warmer climates here. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just sounds different. And one thing that was interesting living on the East Coast was that because it fluctuates so much,
right, to be on the mainland,
you kind of constantly have to be doing things to it to keep it sounding like the same. Whereas Hawaii, it's like, okay, it might sound, might not have any control over the way it sounds, but it's at a constant.
Right.
Absolutely. So, there are ups and downs in terms of controlling the way your instrument sounds.
Did you have a piece this evening, Iggy?
The Lincoln Portrait.
The Lincoln, that is your piece.
That is my piece.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
I changed at the last minute.
I see.
I'm going to save my piece that I had for today for next week or maybe a couple weeks. I have a stockpile of pieces. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. We don't have a winner yet, do we?
Well, I don't know the answers, so it's hard for me to tell.
So,
Spock.
Oh, okay. We do have a winner then, yes. And the correct answer this evening is?
The correct answer is George Takei, who came, again, forgot exactly when he came, but just
2004.
was that the last time we did?
Yeah, that's
Wow.
what the.
So, just a great artist to be with, and of course, a great actor for all of you Star Trek fans. But it was just a beautiful experience, and very appropriate to mention that piece, I think, because of.
It's a great piece. Yeah, it's a wonderful piece.
And so, what is our winner gonna drink?
Our winner is Man Lo.
Manwen Lo.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Manwen.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Excellent.
Wonderful violinist.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
We have a bottle of wine that we will be getting you this week, so stay tuned. So, what does the future look like, Josh?
Just in general, with flying cars and.
Well, not quite the flying cars, but for symphonic music, for the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra.
Ooh. Well, I think that the future heavily is determined by the way our concertmaster Iggy and our executive director will shape it. However, I do hope to see a day when we can return back to playing some of the greats. Mahler, I miss playing Mahler so much, and Sibelius, and they're just works that I really hope we get to play again. They're so important as an orchestra to play. I think that it's also exciting that the symphony, we've been embarking on some journeys with local artists, such as Ron Artis, who I really enjoyed that show, and I think it's also really important to collaborate with people who are playing here, and it's what makes Hawaii special. Every city has something special about it, and some of the local artists here are what makes this place special, and I think it's great that we're playing with them. And so hopefully I hope that we get to see us play some classical rep again with a full orchestra, and I also hope that we get to collaborate more with some of the really wonderful artists here, and I hope that people are contributing and donating to the symphony, because it is financial. It is dependent independently on our community here for us to survive and for us to give music back to you. So I hope that happens as well.
Yeah. Well, we are actively working to get the entire orchestra back to the stage in a safe way, and the rainy season is upon us here, but I'm hopeful. Sorry to my family who's in Chicago and hearing me talk about the terrible weather. But I am hopeful that in the next couple of months here, we'll be back at the Waikiki Shell, and we'll be back here with more of our musicians on the stage of the Hawaii Theater as vaccines roll out. And, living in a household, as Josh and I both do, where we live with healthcare workers, and they've been vaccinated at this point. I think there's a tremendous amount of hope that we're on the path going forward with this, and that we'll all soon be back together. So I look forward to some Mahler very soon. I miss it as well. So before we go here tonight, just want to take a few more questions here, or I guess I'll have to read this one out. Hey guys, it's Jake S. Really enjoying the discussion. Hope we get to play more music together soon in person. Thank you for this. And Jake, thank you for watching and being such a huge part of the symphony and all of the cultural life here in Hawaii. We're truly grateful for your support and to call you a friend and a colleague. So, Iggy, any departing words?
Well, we can wake up in the morning and feel depressed, or we can wake up in the morning and look at the mirror and see what we can do better. Look outward, and be inspired by Dave, by Josh, by Greg, by the places. I walk every Tuesday to this place, this beautiful Hawaii Theater Center. I walk through the Capitol tonight, and It was a little busier just because of the law enforcement, but we feel very lucky. I feel very lucky to live in Hawaii and be free and live in this country. And we're here to make this a better place. And if not us, our next generation.
Yeah, well said.
Indeed.
Josh, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
An honor.
Looking forward to what's next for you as a musician, and looking forward to next for us as the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra.
Yes.
To provide music for our community here. Thanks as always to Gregory Dunn and the Hawaii Theater for having us here, and Iggy, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dave.
And
thank you, Josh.
Thank you again for the support, and we'll be back here next with a very exciting guest. Tune in next Tuesday to see who that is. So, all right, have a good night. Thank you for support.
Good night.
Life changed so fast.
During COVID, we've had a chance to think about what's really important in our lives.
The arts are an expression of what it's like to be human.
To feel, to help us make sense of our world. Does it mean anything if no one sees it?
Training and dedication are stronger than any virus.
We all need to express ourselves.
Keep doing the things that make you happy.
So when the lights come back up,
We'll all be ready.
For the last 24 years, your nonprofit Historic Hawaii Theater has helped millions of people explore and experience the wonder of music, theater, and culture. From school plays to Broadway shows, from the Brothers Kaz to the Beach Boys, we've transported you from Hawaii to the moon and back. Won't you become a member today and help preserve this last remaining historic show palace? Go to hawaiitheater.com. Become a member today. We can't do it without your support. Mahalo.